Hey guys, back in the shop Thursday night. I know we touched on the vortex heads for the 350/60 over 400 horse project. Wanted to show you a few things we're going to have to do to this head to make it fit our application. A couple of things I want to show you, and we'll touch more on these as I do these individual steps. I'll bring you along and show you, but I just wanted to go through quick and show you what we're going to need to do. First of all, we're going to need to worry about our clearance on our lift. We want to run a 500 lift cam. This is a 500 lift movement here on our valve that we have to worry about, that this retainer doesn't hit our seal. 500 leaves us no clearance, so we can't run a 500 lift cam on this. We're going to have binding problems. So we need at least 20,000 clearance at the open, fully compressed. So that leaves us a 480 lift cam, and that isn't even going to happen with the stock springs, because what happens is at 465, 470, these springs will stack up and become solid, which is called coil bind, and you can't compress them any further. So about 465, 470 lift on these springs is max. So we're going to have to replace these stock springs, and I'll explain that to you as we do it. I'll explain to you as I get the new keepers and springs and how we install them, and what the difference is in the springs and the lifters, in the retainers and the keepers, which are these little locks in the top. Something else we're going to need to look at on this are the studs. These studs are pushed into these bosses. There's no knurling, there's no anything to hold them in, so they're quite easy to pull out, especially when you start putting a lot of pressure on them with a higher lift cam. Number four thing we're going to look at is these holes down in here where the push rods, that the push rods come through. Now, when we do a bigger lift cam, these rockers, let me take here, this rocker, is the push rod goes in the end, and it turns this rocker like this. Well, the more you turn this, the closer this push rod, it gets to the center of this stud, which brings it close to the side of this hole. Now, the problem is you can get some binding with this rod in this hole at a high lift. So we're going to take a 1/2 inch drill, and we're going to drill these holes out. These push rod holes, there's going to be 8 of them on each head. We're going to drill them out bigger. These rockers that pull, these studs that pull out, everybody says, oh, you got to take them and you got to have them drilled out and threaded and put thread in studs. We're going to do what the old boys did that worked for years and years and years on heads. That's drill a hole in the side of this boss into the stud and run a pin in there, which will stop these studs from being pulled out. Instead of paying $100 at the shop, we're going to do it for the cost of a drill bit and some roll pins. What else do we need to do? What we run into in these also is binding. Now, this rocker rocks back and forth on this stud. It's kind of hard to do with one hand. Let me see what I can do here. The rocker rocks back and forth on this stud. Now, what happens when you try to push it with the push rod on this side down, you end up binding up on this slot where the rocker is, and that stops you from pushing a 500 lift cam. You get binding on your studs. So we need to take and buy long slot rockers. That's not happening. We're going to buy a carbide bit, and we're going to lengthen that hole. Not a great deal, just on the valve side, probably 20,000ths of an inch. I'll definitely research that before I do that, but that's what we're going to do with that. So there's another cost saving. In this shop, we're not paying $125 for rockers if we can fix them ourselves. If it works, it works. Is it really a bad idea if it works? If it doesn't, then we will purchase new rockers. And we'll definitely check to make sure they work before we ever start this motor. I'm trying to think what else we need to look at on this. There's not too much. If I think of anything else, I'll definitely add it in. But I just thought I would touch on this what we're going to have to do to these heads to get the clearance we need to apply them to our application. We're going to do it as cheaply as we possibly can. I'm not afraid to wreck these heads. I've got $100 or so into them. If I wreck them, then I throw them out and get another set. But that's the live and learn. That's a pretty cheap learning experience, and that's what we're all about here is trying and learning new things. And you know, at a low cost, we're going to try and build some low budget horsepower. All right, guys, I think Saturday we're going to be in the garage with the TA doing a little work, so we'll catch up with you on Saturday. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.